Hi, my name is Mark Stern, and this is my story. I was born in Santa Monica, California, but grew up in Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, aka the Valley. I grew up seeing Christians as the bad guys, mean, cruel, sadistic, and evil. And you might ask how I came about this, and I would say probably the people who taught me this was every Christian I ran into, especially from age 7 to 17. When I was 7, some of the boys in the neighborhood started beating me up, bigger, older boys and dirty fighters as well. And when I asked them why they didn't like me and why they beat me up, they would tell me because I was a dirty Jew and the Jews had killed Jesus, and then they'd beat the crap out of me. And I soon learned that it wasn't just me. The same thing had happened to my dad in Ohio 30 plus years earlier. And I felt a little bit luckier than my dad because the school back there, public school back there, their solution was to have my dad come to school half an hour later than everybody else and leave half an hour earlier so they could keep him away from the other boys and protect him. And by the time I was 8, and this continued, and I mean, like situations I'd have somebody over here talking to me, and then someone over here talking, and then when I turned around, there'd already be a fist, half a second from impact to my nose or my lip or something. And so I went to the rabbi and I asked him what I thought was a kind of a simple question. And it wasn't because I didn't ask, like, why are you beating me up? Why did you beat up my dad? I just said, if we Jews are God's chosen people, how did he let 6 million of us die in the Holocaust? And it's kind of like when Pastor Mike talks about, the tough questions. And I was told that that was a very good question, but the answer would be too mature and sophisticated for an 8-year-old to understand. So I asked it again when I was 9, and no surprise, too mature for a 9-year-old to understand, and a 10-year-old, and an 11. By the time I was 12, I came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to get an answer from organized religion, and I was going to go find it myself. And so I dropped out of organized religion and stopped going to the temple. I went through a phase where I wasn't sure if there was God, but then I thought with nature, too much stuff happened to be random, so I figured there was a God. And I remembered from being a kid where there was a passage in the Bible that a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord. So I thought, back then, the pizza took a long, long time. You couldn't order it like ahead of time. You went in and they did the hand tossing, and you went in before you were hungry. So I thought, well, maybe God went out for a pizza. And he just hadn't been, he hasn't come back. He took a long weekend, maybe like a couple thousand, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. And he just was AWOL kind of thing. And I grew up with a desire that I was going to try to find answers myself. And my attitude towards Christians actually hardened the more I found out about history, and especially history like with my own family, things that happened to my mom, and discrimination back. She was a pioneer in the women's liberation movement without ever wanting to be one, because she got her bachelor's degree in June of 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor, before Rosie the Riveter, and before women had to fill in for men. And she was really proud of that. And she was living in New York with her older sister. And back then you had to fill out your religion on the job application. And my aunt told my mom to lie and put down Protestant in protest. Kind of an inside family joke. And my mom said she wouldn't do that. She finally got a job with Texaco Oil. And she was so proud of that. And the first day, I was about 17 when she told me. The first day that they came up to, the head of personnel came up to her and told her, Miss Himmelsteib, we've made a terrible mistake. We're a Christian company, and we don't hire Jews. But because you were honest, we want to do the right thing. We're going to pay you for the 3 hours you've been here, but you have to pack up your stuff and leave. And that was the month that, actually, June of 1941 was the month when the Holocaust started. That's when the Germans actually invaded Russia, and that's when they actually started shooting the Jews by the thousands. So it was, and I remember it was important to me about that because my mom, 60 years after that, in 2001, fast forwarding, she told me she might be able to believe in Jesus like I did, but she could never, ever still call herself a Christian or wear that label. And I refused to hear anything about Jesus. If you came to the door and you started talking about Jesus, I'd slam the door. If you started talking about Jesus, I would walk away, turn the channel on the TV. Actually, when I was watching the movie Ben-Hur, which I was going like, yeah, good Jewish boy beating up this Roman in the chariot race. And then there's this scene where Jesus gives him some water, and I turned it off. It took me 20 years before I went back to watch the rest of the movie. And when I was in college, when the time came for graduation in June of '73, I was 8.5 units short, so I had to go to summer school. And instead of staying in San Diego, I got to go to the University of Madrid in Spain. And then, since I didn't have anything to do, I was a beach bum. I spent 6 months actually in the Mediterranean and camped in the beaches in Greece, drinking all the time and spending less than $1 and getting a great suntan because there was no trees. And I was trying to get to Israel by boat, but that was only during the summer to the tourists, and I didn't realize that. So I had to go from Crete back to Athens, and everybody was telling me not to do that. And I'm going like, well, why? And they said, because there's fighting. I go like, well, there's always fighting. What I didn't know is that was the 2 days, or the day after the Yom Kippur War started in 1973. So I was able to do my best, put on my best sails, and talk my way onto a flight from El Al out of Athens that had nothing but Israeli reservists coming back, and 3 Americans, me, one guy named Tom who had a transistor radio because I wanted to follow the news, and somebody else, I don't know how. And it was pretty tight security. We got into Israel, and we went up to one kibbutz, and when we got there, I was up near the north, they said, we can't take you. And I went like, we took buses all the way here and hitchhiked and everything. What do you mean you can't take us? You said yesterday you could. And they said, see that bungalow over there? We went, yeah. And they said, see those big holes in it? We said, yeah. They said, well, last night a couple of rockets kind of came in there, and that's where you were going to be sleeping. Okay, we went back to Jerusalem, and there was a blackout out, and we were in the youth hostel, and nothing to do, and someone had some Lebanese hash, and I'd only been stoned like twice in my life, even though I was kind of a hippie kid. I hadn't really smoked anything that strong. I got stoned at about 2:30 in the morning. I had the munchies really, really bad, and everybody's going like, I'm going out, get something to eat. And they're going like, you're crazy, you can't go out. And I go, yes, I am. They said, look, 90% of the falafel stands, which is the fast food things, are closed because of the war, and it's nighttime. So there's probably none open. It's a blackout, and the police carry submachine guns during peacetime, and it's a war. And I go, I don't care. So I went walking around, left the youth hospital in Jerusalem, and I'm walking around, don't know how long or where I was, but I turned a corner, and all of a sudden I'm 50 feet from the Wailing Wall. And the Wailing Wall is like the most sacred, revered place in Judaism. It's the only remaining remnant of the temple that was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. It's the Western Wall. And it was excavated in 1967, and it's like these giant limestone stones that are about this big square and twice as long, and they're stacked up, and this wall goes up about 100 feet, and there's like cracks about this big between the stones, and people write little notes to God, and they stick them in there, and then they pray, and as they're praying, they're rocking back and forth and crying, and that's why it's nicknamed the Wailing Wall. So I'm standing there, and there's no one around me, but I know there's armed guards watching me. And I'm standing, and I kind of look up, and it's a full moon, and it's darker than it would have been even 2,000 years ago, because back then they would have had torches and stuff, but it wasn't. And I look up, and I start talking to God, okay? And I'm doing this real religious talk, and I go, hi, God. How was the pizza? Good, I hope. And I just go to him, and I say, I'm 21 years old, and my life's okay, but you know what? I don't want it. So I'm going to give it back to you right here, right now. If you want to send a lightning bolt down, and I don't care. I don't complain. I want to give it back to you, but there's just one condition, one term. I don't want to live without you, and I have no idea how to be close to you, God, so I just want you to send somebody just to show me how to get back home, how to show me the way, show me how to get back to you. That's all I ask. And I remember a week or so ago talking with Pastor Mike, and we're talking about that God sometimes answers prayers right away, and sometimes it takes a while, and people get upset. Hey, it's been a day or two. For me, it was 3,706 days. Yes, 3,706 days. It was the Saturday after Thanksgiving, 1983, living in Santa Barbara. I was a really sound sleeper, and it used to really take a lot to wake me up. And if you woke me up, I was really grouchy.